It doesn't take much to lose yourself. One small loss, one moment of frustration, and suddenly the plan that took months to build begins to unravel in seconds. We've all been there. That silent space between discipline and disaster when you know exactly what you should do, but you can't stop doing the opposite. This is not a tutorial. It's a confession. A real case the day I placed 20 trades in a row, not because the market demanded it, but because my emotions did. What started as analysis turned into obsession. What began as logic became survival. And what looked like trading was really a spiral. But sometimes it's in the spiral that you find the mirror. And if you're willing to look, the reflection can change everything. It started with a small loss. One trade, nothing dramatic, a quick red candle, a minor stop out. I told myself it didn't matter, that it was part of the process. But inside something subtle shifted, a spark of irritation. That quiet thought that says you can get it back. That whisper that every trader knows but pretends not to hear. I opened another position, smaller this time, almost to prove I was calm. It wasn't about recovery, I told myself. It was about discipline. But the moment I hit buy, I felt it, the rush, the hope, the illusion that I was back in control. When that trade failed too, I felt something break open inside me. I wasn't trading anymore. I was reacting. I was defending my ego against the idea that I could be wrong twice in a row. And when that idea began to grow, I did what I always promised I wouldn't. I added size. The chart blurred. Candles moved faster than my breath. Each second stretched and snapped. I started clicking without thinking, 20 trades in total before I even looked up. My notes sat untouched beside me, my plan forgotten. I wasn't following structure. I was chasing a feeling, the need to make the pain disappear. There's a moment when revenge trading stops being about the market. You stop seeing charts and start seeing ghosts. The ghost of what your balance used to be, the ghost of who you thought you were, and you start fighting those ghosts as if one more trade could exorcise them. I could feel the heat of my own frustration. The monitor's glow painted my face in shifting red and green like a warning I couldn't hear. I kept muttering small lies. It's oversold. This is the bottom. One more entry and it'll reverse. But deep down I knew I wasn't analyzing. I was pleading. Every trader wants to believe they're rational, that their edge will save them from emotion. But the truth is, once anger enters your system, logic becomes a servant. You use it to justify what you already decided to do, and I had decided to fight. The losses piled up quietly, the way dust collects on a forgotten shelf. You don't notice until you touch it and leave fingerprints everywhere. I told myself I was still fine, that I just needed one clean setup to recover. But what I really wanted was forgiveness from myself, from the market, from the feeling of failure that clung to me like humidity. Somewhere around the 15th trade, I realized I hadn't taken a single breath I could remember. My hands were trembling, my shoulders locked. The rhythm of my heartbeat synced with the ticks of the chart, fast, irregular, desperate. It wasn't the loss that scared me. It was the realization that I was no longer choosing anything. The market was pressing the buttons through me. I remember staring at the account balance, watching it melt, $1 at a time. Every tick felt personal. Every loss a small insult. I thought if I just stayed in long enough, something would turn, but nothing turned except me. From disciplined trader to gambler, from student to prisoner. The irony is that in those moments, you feel most alive. The adrenaline convinces you you're doing something meaningful, but it's hollow life, loud, shaky, and empty. And when the final trade closed in loss, the silence was unbearable. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the wall. 20 trades, not a single one from the plan. My mind replayed them like a montage of mistakes, click, loss, click, loss, click, loss. But then something strange happened. The anger didn't come, Not this time, only fatigue, a kind of deep exhaustion that doesn't live in the body but in the soul. I sat there and whispered to no one, "What did I just do?" The answer wasn't complicated. I had tried to trade my way out of an emotion, and emotion doesn't care about profit or loss. It only cares about being felt. That realization hit quietly like a curtain falling. The noise stopped. The need to act dissolved. And all that was left was awareness. The awareness that I'd been running from a feeling not from the market, not from the chart, but from myself. It's a strange thing seeing your own mind from the outside. You realize how automatic it is, how little control you truly have when emotion takes the wheel. And yet that realization itself is the first real control you ever get back. I didn't close the platform right away. I just sat there staring at the empty chart. It looked peaceful now, almost still. The same chart that felt like war minutes ago was just lines and colors again. The market hadn't changed, only I had. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the losses, but because of what they revealed. It wasn't the money that hurt, it was the mirror. Trading doesn't punish your mistakes, it reflects them. And that reflection is merciless. You can't argue with it. You can only accept it. I opened my trading journal, a notebook that had been empty for weeks because I'd convinced myself journaling was unnecessary. Now it felt like the only honest thing left to do. I wrote every thought that passed through me, the anger, the fear, the justifications. I wrote until the ink thinned and my mind stopped spinning. Somewhere on that page I found the first hint of peace. Writing slowed me down. Each word was a breath. Each sentence a small exhale of truth. I realized I didn't need to fix the day. I needed to understand it. There's a difference between solving and seeing. Solving is ego. Seeing is awareness. As I wrote, I traced the pattern backward. Where did it start? Not with the first loss, but with the thought that I shouldn't have lost. That belief, the refusal to accept imperfection, was the spark that lit the entire fire. Every revenge spiral begins with that one belief: I can't be wrong. It's such a small sentence, but it's poison. Because once you believe it, every loss becomes a threat to your identity. You stop defending your account and start defending your self-image. And no strategy survives that. When I looked at my notes the next morning, they read like a confession. Not of financial mistakes, but of emotional ones. I had risked not just my capital, but my clarity. And clarity once lost takes longer to recover than any balance. I decided that day would become a case study, not to teach others, but to remember for myself. A day to remind me how thin the line is between discipline and chaos, how quickly a single thought can spiral into 20 impulsive trades. I wanted to see the anatomy of a breakdown, not to relive it, but to learn from it. I called it Case 1, not because it was my first loss, but because it was my first real understanding of myself as a trader. The first time I saw that the battle was never with the market, but with my own reactions. That morning I did something I hadn't done in months. I sat down to trade with no intention of making money. I opened the charts just to observe. No positions, no predictions, just presence. The market moved the same way it always does: waves of noise, bursts of structure, moments of clarity. But this time I wasn't chasing any of it. I noticed how my heart reacted when price moved near levels I used to trade. I noticed the small pull of impulse, that tiny urge to click, and I watched it without acting. It was strange. The urge came and went like a wave, and behind it there was stillness. For the first time in a long while, I felt detached, not numb, just steady. That was the real recovery. Not getting the money back, but getting myself back. Discipline, I realized, isn't control. It's surrender. It's the choice to stop fighting the feeling and start witnessing it. To let the storm pass without trying to direct the wind. That day I didn't take a single trade. And yet it felt like the most successful trading session of my life. because I left the desk lighter than I sat down. That's profit, not the kind you can measure, but the kind that makes every future trade more deliberate, more conscious, more human. I didn't know it then, but that was the start of something new, the slow rebuilding of confidence, the quiet reintroduction of patience. The revenge spiral had shown me my breaking point, but also my threshold for awareness. Once you see yourself that clearly, you can't unsee it. I used to think control meant domination, mastery over impulses, perfection of execution. Now I know control means humility, the acceptance that imperfection will always visit, and the wisdom to greet it calmly. Part of me still misses the rush sometimes, the dopamine, the illusion of being in charge. But then I remember how that rush felt when it ended, the silence, the shame, the emptiness. And I breathe. That breath is my stop-loss now. That's how I started turning revenge into reflection, by slowing down, by treating each emotion like a trade, something to observe, something to manage, something to close with awareness. And in that slow process, I found something I didn't expect. Peace wasn't at the end of control. Peace was what allowed control to begin. The next day I woke up before sunrise. The air was still the city quiet. I made coffee and sat at my desk, but I didn't open the platform right away. I just looked at it, the screens, the charts, the same setup that had witnessed my unraveling. It felt different now, not as a weapon, but as a mirror. I realized that the market doesn't forgive or punish. It only reflects. It shows you yourself in motion. And if you stare long enough, it shows you who you are when you stop pretending. I opened my journal from the night before. The pages smelled faintly of ink and exhaustion. The words were raw: anger, denial, shame, awareness. But at the end, one sentence stood out. Today was not a failure. It was data about my mind. I read it 3 times, and for the first time in months, it felt true. I used to think I was trading price action. Now I understand I was trading emotion. Every entry, every exit, every moment of hesitation was a reflection of how I related to uncertainty. That's what trading really is, the art of being with uncertainty without collapsing into it. When I finally opened the charts, I didn't look for setups. I looked for sensations. How my body responded when price moved against me. How my breathing changed when a candle formed faster than expected. That awareness was new. It was like seeing the invisible forces that had been driving me for years. The market opened and volatility kicked in. Normally that sound, that fast rhythm of price would pull me in instantly. But this time I sat still. I waited. Not with tension, but with curiosity. And I noticed something. Patience isn't waiting without emotion. It's feeling the emotion and not letting it decide for you. A few minutes later, a setup appeared. Perfect structure, clear level, everything aligned. I entered the trade. Small size, no rush. And as it moved, I noticed the voice inside me begin to whisper again. Maybe add more size. Maybe move the stop. The same voice that had guided me into 20 impulsive trades. But instead of reacting, I listened. I smiled. And I let it speak until it faded. That's when I realized mastery isn't silence. It's awareness without obedience. The voices never disappear. You just stop mistaking them for truth. The trade played out exactly as planned. Not a huge win, just a clean, measured result. But the real profit was internal. I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't chased. I had felt the emotions and still followed structure. That's what a controlled day feels like, not exciting, not dramatic, just peaceful. When I closed the platform, I felt no urge to check the balance. The number didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had finally broken the pattern. The spiral had ended not because I forced it, but because I understood it. Revenge trading is an addiction to closure. You're not addicted to the loss or the win, you're addicted to the feeling of finishing the unfinished story. But some stories aren't meant to be finished. They're meant to be released. I think back to that day, the 20 trades, the chaos, the helplessness, and I no longer feel shame. I feel gratitude because that was the day I met the real trader in me, not the confident one who studies setups, not the technical analyst who can explain price action, but the fragile, impatient, emotional human being who just wants to be enough. That's the truth behind most traders. We don't trade for money alone. We trade for meaning. We trade to prove that we can control something in a world that often feels uncontrollable. But the irony is control doesn't come from holding tighter. It comes from letting go of the need to control. Each day since then, I've practiced that letting go. When I feel tension rise, I breathe. When I want to overtrade, I write. When I lose, I remind myself the loss is feedback, not failure. Every chart is a conversation between structure and emotion, and my job is not to silence the emotion, but to listen without reacting. It's strange how simple it sounds and how hard it is to live by. But over time, the gaps between awareness and reaction grow longer. You start catching yourself before the spiral begins. You start trusting stillness more than action. And slowly, quietly, you begin to change. Trading stopped feeling like survival. It became observation. I began to see that the same discipline I practiced in markets applied everywhere else. How I handled uncertainty here mirrored how I handled it in life. And that realization connected everything: patience, clarity, presence. Now, when I sit down to trade, I don't ask, how much can I make today? I ask, can I stay aware today? That's my metric now, awareness per session. And on the days I stay aware, the market feels softer, more predictable. Not because it changed, but because I did. Sometimes people ask, how do you stop revenge trading? And I tell them, you don't stop at once. You stop at 100 small times. Each time you feel the urge and choose stillness instead of reaction. Each time you close early to protect peace instead of chasing validation, that's how you heal the pattern. The revenge spiral was never about trading. It was a mirror of my relationship with discomfort. I couldn't stand to feel wrong. Now I see that being wrong is inevitable. What matters is how quickly I return to awareness after it happens. A controlled day doesn't mean a perfect day. It means a conscious one. A day where you can see the mind move and still stay centered. That's the quiet victory every trader is secretly chasing. There's a quote I wrote at the bottom of my journal that day: the market doesn't test your skill. It tests your ability to stay human under pressure. And that's exactly what revenge trading takes away: your humanity. It turns you into a machine built on reaction. Awareness brings you back to being human again. Now, when I lose, I don't ask, why did this happen? I ask, what was I feeling before it happened? Because every trade begins in emotion long before you click. And if you can see that emotion forming, you can shape it. You can pause. You can choose again. The spiral taught me that failure isn't a moment. It's a pattern. And the only way to break a pattern is to slow down enough to see it. That's what mindfulness in trading really is: not detachment, but deep attention. Not indifference, but intimacy with the present moment. If I could go back to that day, to the version of me who thought 20 trades would fix one loss, I wouldn't stop him. I would let him go through it. Because the pain was the teacher I needed. The chaos was the mirror that revealed what structure could not. Every click, every mistake, every frustrated breath, they were all part of the lesson that discipline is born from awareness, not from control. So now when I sit in front of the screen and the urge returns, that whisper that says just one more trade, you can make it back, I smile. I've heard it before. It used to sound convincing. Now it sounds familiar, like an echo from a place I no longer live. I breathe. I let the thought pass, and I return to the present moment, to the chart, to the rhythm, to the silence between candles. That's where I trade from now, from silence. The day I made 20 trades in anger used to haunt me. Now it grounds me, because it showed me the full range of who I can be: chaotic and calm, reckless and aware, human and evolving. It reminded me that every trader is both the spiral and the recovery, and that the distance between them is measured in a single breath. Today I still lose sometimes, I still make mistakes, but I no longer spiral, because I finally understand that trading is not about eliminating weakness, it's about befriending it. When you make peace with your impulses, they lose their power. When you stop fearing the fall, you start moving freely again. So if you find yourself stuck in your own revenge spiral, don't rush to escape it. Observe it. Write it down. Breathe through it. Let it show you the parts of yourself you've been ignoring. Because once you see them, they stop controlling you. The spiral ends not with a win, but with awareness. Awareness that you were never fighting the market, you were fighting your own resistance to being human. And when you accept that you stop trading for validation and start trading for clarity, that's what a controlled day truly is: not the absence of emotion, but the presence of understanding. Not perfection, but peace in the middle of imperfection. I used to chase the feeling of victory. Now I chase moments of awareness. And every time I find one, the market feels quiet again. That's how I know I'm home. If you've ever felt that same spiral, that urge to make it back to prove you're still in control, you already know how heavy it feels. The noise, the racing thoughts, the way each click feels like redemption, until it isn't. But here's what I learned. Control isn't something you take, it's something you return to. Awareness isn't a skill. It's your natural state buried under the noise of ego and reaction. You don't escape the spiral by fighting it. You end it by understanding it, by slowing down long enough to see the emotion before it moves your hand. That's where clarity lives. That's where discipline begins. This was case number one, not a story about the market, but about the mind behind it. Because in the end, trading isn't about charts. It's about the space between impulse and awareness, the space where you choose who you want to be. This is mind over markets, where every trade begins with the mind and every lesson ends in stillness.